had a request from a viewer for chicken and dressing, but I'm going to make some turkey and dressing, and we're just going to jump right into this recipe. I always put biscuits in my dressing. This was taught to me by my mother and grandmother, and I have got 3 biscuits for this recipe. And that can be store-bought, or you can make them yourself. Or you can freeze your leftover biscuits. I always freeze my leftover biscuits around the holidays, and I make my cornbread ahead of time. I am going to go through the process of making a pan of cornbread for you because this is really important. We're going to start off with about 3 tablespoons of oil in a cast iron skillet. Turn your oven on to 400 degrees and put that skillet in the oven. And while that's in the oven, we are going to make our cornbread batter. And I'm starting off with 2 cups of cornmeal. And this is key. Do not add any flour to it. Don't add any mayonnaise to it, because we want this to be just pure cornmeal, because it will hold up a lot better in this recipe than that good old moist cornbread that we all love. And your dressing will not turn to cornmeal mush. I added 1 cup of milk, 1 egg, and I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of canola oil. But I'm going to add some more milk. I'm just trying to measure this for you guys. I don't typically measure this. Usually when I make this, I make double this recipe. So this was a little different for me, just to make a 9 by 13. And I added about 1.5 cup of milk total. You're just looking for a certain consistency. Just like this. That's how you want it. Now let's take our cornmeal batter over to the oven and get that hot skillet out, and we're going to pour the excess canola oil into the cornmeal batter and give it a nice stir. Do keep in mind that if you let that cornmeal batter sit too long, it will thicken on you and you may have to add more milk. But I didn't let it sit too long, and we're just going to pour this right into that hot skillet. And do you see my pot holder? My daughter made that for me when she was a young girl. That is over 20 years old. But in the oven we go on 400 degrees. And yes, I know I need to clean my stovetop. While that's in the oven, we are going to go ahead and cut our celery. Now I'm using 1.5 stalks of celery. You can use 1.5 to 2 stalks of celery in this 9 by 13. I diced 1/3 of a yellow Vidalia onion, and I could have put the whole onion in. I don't think it would have hurt a thing, and I typically use a little bit more onion than I do the celery. I'm sure that you may make your dressing totally different than I do, but this recipe's been handed down from my mother, from her mother, and from her mother, just handed down and changed a little bit as it went along the way. But this has been one of my most requested recipes. Okay, so if you're following along with me, we're going to get that cornbread out of the oven. Cornbread was in the oven about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. You just want to make sure you get it brown. I kept having camera issues during this video, but I like to go ahead and slice mine just as if you were serving it. This makes it a lot easier when you're putting it into your baking dish. And also my camera is off there. It's not showing the entire 9 by 13, but we're just going to proceed with this video because this was a hard video to make. But now we are going to take our 3 biscuits and just crumble them right into that cornbread. This is key. This is what my mother taught me. Do not crumble that cornbread into just cornmeal. You want to start off with big chunks of cornbread, because the more you work this, and you're going to, it is going to just keep breaking down until you've got nothing but cornmeal. I mean, just cornmeal mush. And don't get me wrong, some people might like their dressing that way, but in my family, we do not. And I do. I have to honestly say, people ask for this recipe and how did you do this? But this is what my mom taught me. And even the biscuits, you don't want to break those down either, just yet. And now we're going to add our onion and our celery. And I don't measure this, but I like to make sure I've got enough to coat the top, that it's spread out there. And this was perfect. And I'm a biscuit lover. I had to have a bite of that biscuit, y'all. And even if I would have used 2 stalks of celery and that whole onion, I think it would have been fine. But now we are going to make the broth. I'm sure my great-grandmother used real chicken broth, and my grandmother used canned chicken broth and real chicken broth. I think I've seen her use both, but my mother used canned chicken broth, and she added cream of chicken to the recipe that was handed down. And I do like my mother add the cream of chicken because I think it was better. It just got better and better, y'all. And my mom added cream of chicken, so I'm using 3 cans of cream of chicken. And also, my mom used canned chicken broth, and I do as well during the holidays. But today we're going to do something a little different. I had made that turkey, so I'm going to use turkey broth. I've never done this before, and I thought I would just utilize that turkey broth. Did I like the turkey broth better? Some of you may ask. No, I did not. I like the chicken broth. I like my traditional chicken and dressing, but I thought I would try this, and y'all, it was still good. Oh, it was so good. It was out of season, so it was good, but I will continue to use my chicken broth. I added 3 cans of the turkey broth to this, so a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, during the holidays when I make it, I usually end up adding more cream of chicken. I use the canned chicken broth, and also sometimes I'll add water to it as well because I make a huge pan during the holidays. But we're going to go ahead and stir that together. My mom cooks it on the stove, but I just stir it together and get it mixed really well. And then we're going to pour it slowly into our cornmeal mixture. Now you'll notice this big chunk. You want that broken down. You don't want such huge chunks that it does not retain that chicken broth and cream of chicken mixture in it. You'll find chunks of cornbread in your dressing. So I just take my spoon and I kind of fluff this. This is what my mother taught me to do, and I don't know the correct terminology for this, but you're not stirring this. You do not want to break this down until it turns to mush. That is the perfect little chunk that I'm showing you. But you are going to continue to fluff and add your mixture, your chicken broth and cream of chicken mixture to this. And if you don't feel like you have enough liquid in this at this point, you can add water to this. This is usually when I add water to it. But I didn't add any to this. I felt like I had enough of the chicken broth and cream of chicken in this. And it was perfect. And honestly, the more the better. You don't want to drown it. But if you see it around the edges, your liquid, that's okay. That's okay because your cornmeal is going to soak up that cream of chicken and chicken broth. And again, I'm just fluffing it, and this is the perfect example of fluffing, y'all. Also, I'm making sure there's not any huge chunks in this. We are going to add the main ingredient, sage. Now, sage, I have found, is a personal preference. I added 2 tablespoons of sage to this. And honestly, I probably could have added a little bit more, but this was so good. I would rather add just a little bit less than too much. That's just me. Again, that's a personal preference. But I added 2 tablespoons. I probably could have got away with maybe 2.5 tablespoons. 2.5 to 3 tablespoons. And because I did not use chicken broth, I added a little bit of salt. I don't usually do that. But chicken broth has sodium in it, so that's what I always use, so I added a little salt. Now we're going to give it a taste test. And I did use a clean spoon. I actually tasted this twice. And I usually like to get my husband to taste it as well, because once you get a bite of that sage, it's really hard to judge it. Now we're going to smooth this out, and we're going to put this in the oven on 350 degrees. And this cooked for about 50 minutes. And voila, our dressing is done. And y'all, this was so good. It was actually a treat to have this out of season. I am that person that likes to make it around the holidays. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and y'all go make you some dressing.